Welcome back to Stacking the Deck. All right. It's so good to see my good friend Easton Evans. And we're
Yo, yo,
joined
yo.
with Kevin Cote. Some of you
What's
guys
going
might know.
on?
Some of y'all might know him from his MetaZoo days. But Kevin, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell the audience who might not know about you a little about yourself.
Yeah, I know. Thank you for having me on here, Ed and Easton. Love to have you guys. Went back way back in the day. All
You still
that.
collect the con.
Yeah.
Houston collect. No, it was Dallas Fort Worth, right?
Maybe. No.
Oh,
We first ever, I think the first, or what, did you go to Houston Collect the Con?
no,
I'm
he
not
wasn't.
sure.
I don't think you
I'm
were.
not
were you?
sure. No, I'm not sure if I
Fact
It
was
was
check.
there.
Dallas. It was Dallas.
Fact
So it was
check us.
PCG Pro Support
Yeah,
Pro Support Weekend.
it was Fort Worth. No, I love Texas. I love Fort Worth. Yeah. Yeah, hey, I used to be the R&D director at MetaZoo. I think I was the longest R&D director, about 2 years. So Nightfall to worked on. I left by the time Native was released, but I did work. Native was my last set I worked on, so did that. About a year and 8 months around that, and yeah, that was my main professional project. Outside of that, I am working with Stab Crab Games. Shout out to them.
Shout out to the team.
Shout out to the team. And we're working on actually a board game. I think we're calling it a board game now called Crazy Croppers. And it's a board game, not a TCG, but it is a deck builder. So we'll talk about it more later on, but you do build decks in that game with a deck building system. And even though it's a board game, my roots are in trading card games. So I do take a lot of card game inspiration into the cards of that board game. And something about me, I'm not working in the game industry as a game designer as my main job. I'm actually in nursing school right now. Been doing that about 4 months, I think, 4 or 5 months. And I'm still continuing game design on the side. So basically doing this nursing school thing, also working as a CNA, certified nursing assistant, and also trying to find the time to have a social life, sleep, and of course work on game design on the side. So doing all of that, trying to juggle all those hats right now.
Mm-hmm. What was hard, working with patients or working with TCG MetaZoo fans?
What card enthusiast?
I will actually say it's easier working with patients than. I'm just kidding. No,
I'm teasing.
no,
I'm
I'm
teasing.
just
You
kidding.
don't have to answer that honestly. I just I
Well-
thought that would be funny.
Well, I will say this, right? I would rather be a CNA than I would work like with a big card game company, because the stress, we can talk about it later on as well, but the stress, the burnout that comes with working with a bigger card game company, it's a lot. It's a
Mhm.
lot, and I would be lying to say I was burnt out after MetaZoo, see some therapy, change some health habits over that. But yeah, nursing, the stress of nursing is different than trading card games by all means, not the same
Mhm.
level of stress. But yeah, I mean, basically, I would rather work on my own terms than work with a big trading card game company. And anyone who's been there, they know what I'm talking about, right?
For sure. Do you feel like I guess the resolve and confidence that you have now in your professional life, working at MetaZoo kind of helped develop that? Like, do you feel like you would be in a place where you're at now without being at MetaZoo?
Without MetaZoo, no. MetaZoo made me who I am, for
Mhm.
sure. As a designer, it, funneled me, it steamrolled me to become a way better designer than I ever was, right? I mean, MetaZoo was my first game design project in general. And honestly, that's where I got started with game design. So it was kind of a trial by fire with MetaZoo. I had to learn everything, learn game balance, learn set design, learn how to use programs to create the cards, learn to make a playtesting system, learn, some DevOps for playtesting, like a lot of stuff to just, become an R&D director, but to kind of answer the question more specifically, yeah, I mean, the confidence skills I gained from MetaZoo, being in tournaments, all that definitely helped with my confidence as, a future nurse and as a nursing aide right now. But, game design and nursing, it's still pretty different. I will say, like, you both deal with people, but I will say if you can deal with, like, I work with people who have dementia. Right? A large portion of who I work with. I work in long-term care. So if you can work with people who have dementia, you can probably work with, people as a judge for card games.
Yeah.
The level of patience you have there. But yeah,
Can you tell us a little bit about how you came to be like, I don't know if like you aspired to work in game design, but like, how did you get rolled into MetaZoo? You said MetaZoo was your first foray. So, I mean, how did that kind of come to be?
Yeah, that's actually, I would say it's a pretty interesting story. So I didn't think of becoming a game designer, actually. I've always loved games. So I've had three main passions in life. It's been games as a whole, video games most importantly, but also card games, and also board games as well. Music and science. I've always loved science. So I was working on a biology degree in evolution and ecology at Sac State. And originally I was super invested in school, 4.0 GPA, first year and a half, into honors program, all of that. However, being more into school, I was actually a nursing major or declared interest in nursing. And I decided, hey, I got an A in anatomy. I like this biology stuff. Let's do biology. That arguably was a mistake if I had to look back at it, because biology in academia was not what I expected. It was way more bureaucratic than I expected. It was a lot more like who you knew than like what you knew, right? And I started to get burnt out, from it. It didn't help that during my third year at the beginning semester, COVID hit and all the classes went online.
Yeah.
And my whole like academic experience got cut, especially because if you know evolution and ecology, a lot of it is field based. So I didn't have access to working in the field with like animals or plants, whatever. I actually specialized more into botany, which we'll talk about. I used in a certain board game, but yeah, I mean, like I was out there picking out weeds in the backyard, or weeds in my local fields. Hey, instead of like out in Sac State, where I went to. So I got burned out from academia, and my grades started to slip, and this whole online thing wasn't working for me. One day I was on a couch in my living room, and I found a Facebook ad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody in that Facebook ad.
I mean,
It's always available.
yeah.
Okay. Actually, mine was a little different. I saw a Facebook ad from my local game store.
Okay.
For this game called MetaZoo. That's where I found it from. And I looked into it and I was like, wow. Because another passion of mine was cryptids. I've always loved like legends and like weird animals, all of that. I love lost tapes, as growing up as well. And I was into it. So I started looking into it and I'm like, oh my God, this is for me. And I got really into it in like a couple of days, but I got a little too into it because I asked a lot of questions and I actually got banned from the Discord. Not
no
for cursing.
way.
Yeah, I did. Most people don't notice. I actually got banned, not because I cursed at anyone. I don't think I'm disrespectful.
No, you're.
What was the question though?
I asked a lot of questions.
Number is so stupid.
Well, no, I mean, like the rules of the game. I delved super hard into. I asked questions on Terra, questions on fourth walls, all that. I would like ping Mike a lot. I'll ping like MetaZoo Games a lot. Yeah, because there wasn't a rule against pinging, right? And basically, they treated my, Ross Quila, I love Ross Quila, by the way. I still talk to him here and there, right? But the mod at the time, like, they all thought like I was being aggressive and like, overall, but I was just really curious.
Yeah.
So I ended up basically, when I got banned, I was really sad. I was very sad because I never got banned anywhere. And I was super into the game for like a few days, So I ended up, but I'm kind of a stubborn person if you know me. So I ended up making some alt accounts and just hopped back into Discord. But eventually they knew it was me because who else would be asking these specific gameplay questions overall? But eventually Mike found out that I wasn't aggressive. I was actually being supportive of the game. And I stayed on. I stayed on an alt account called like Mothman1, something like that. And that account was on the server for like still to this day, if it's still up. But yeah. So basically, long story short, that's how I got into MetaZoo. And I ended up just helping Mike out, with some stuff. I became a judge. I was working on judge stuff, and doing like the judge exams, MetaZoology exams. And eventually, I talked with Mike a lot, gained his trust. I made the MetaZoo How to Play video. That's like 50K, 1,000 views, whatever it is. I made that in like 2 days of recording or 1 day of recording, whatever it was. Put it up there. And to my personal story, I was about to graduate basically like within 6 months of Sac State. And I was so burnt out on my degree. I didn't really have a big plan, to be honest with you. I thought about working with the state, but I didn't feel like that would be fulfilling for me. Mm-hmm. So then I decided, hey, I've been doing so much work for this MetaZoo guy, and for Mike, and I've been doing so much work for MetaZoo as a whole. Why don't I just ask if they had a job opening? So I was like, hey, Mike, over DM, I was like, hey, I'm graduating, got time open. If you have a job opening available, I would love to help with like game design. He thought it was a good idea. Gave me the title, what I have. That was it. It was like who you knew and just the volunteering I did. So I got the job, and then the rest is history, Worked on that for almost 2 years. Feels like 5 years, but it was about 2 years of work, So
it was like a really dense like time, like to pack in a lot of like substance, I guess. I remember your was it 2 per spell book? Was that the name of the website, or is it
those articles?
Yeah, I made a MZ notepad. Yeah.
That's it.
That's it.
Yeah. That was only OGs know that. So like that was the attempt. There was nothing on MetaZoo competitive play. There was nothing on it. And if you know me, I'm a pretty competitive person at the same time. There's videos of me playing MetaZoo online from the channel and all that. But I love the game. I really did love the game. I love the community, and I wanted to put out there, hey, like this is a good game if you really look into it and try to deck build. So MZ Notepad was an attempt. I would just take a basic notepad from Microsoft and just write out a deck list. Like that was the whole idea of the name. And kind of like what you guys are doing and talking about like grassroots like development of a game. Just I have an idea on paper, I'm gonna write it out. My handwriting is really bad. You know my handwriting. That's why I type everything out like on a notepad. It's basic. Just get it done.
But I remember the Quetch article that you had. Like that was the one that got me. I was like, dang. And then you broke down and why Quetch is just the best what he was. I mean, I just remember watching some of the old tournaments, the TTS events, and I'm like, man, Quetch is good. And you try to get one, it's like $1 jillion dollars starting out. So
no, I appreciate it. I that was a huge passion project. I'm glad you guys remember that, and people, it's like OGs really remember that. Well, when I went on to become R&D director, I had to like stop a lot of that. I mean, as professionalism, I had to stop a lot of that, particularly because when you're an R&D for a game and you create any kind of like metagame content, it comes off differently. You have a different ethos, right? Whenever you show off like that, So and this applies to any game company, any R&D, right? Just be really careful showing off any metagame kind of stuff to influence that kind of like player base, you know. But yeah, I stopped a lot of that, and that's basically the MetaZoo story. I did that for, gosh, again, 2 years. Feels like the 5 years, but yeah, I mean, basically, kind of like biology, it kind of got burnt out, from it all. Like, if it was like us pumping out sets quickly, really fast sets,
and
right?
a lot of unique cards too.
A lot of unique cards, yeah. Like Nightfall was mostly my development. I had Mike. I want to give credit to Mike too, because he put up a lot of the blueprints for it, and definitely took a lot of inspiration from what he wanted. But in terms of like getting the mechanics right, getting the numbers, like setting it, I did a lot of that groundwork for it. And well, when I came on, I really do believe in diversity of like gameplay and mechanics, and you'll notice this too from me too. I try my best not to copy from other games. I try to make organic cards. I'm not saying my cards I design are exactly unique, because that's impossible, right?
No, they're pretty
But
unique. So like, I'll brag on you a little bit. I'm gonna keep it 100 with you. Some folks were like, "Oh, Kevin, he doesn't know anything about balance or game design," and that's the thing that every gamer says about every game. Let me tell you that there's no such thing as a truly like balanced game. Otherwise, you're maybe playing like what, poker or solitaire. I always love saying like this is a Kevin Cote like card design. Like sometimes you just tell like bombastic big things. Like I don't know, some of the cards that has a lot of your personality in it, and that's what draws me to MetaZoo, the jank factor, so to speak, where it's like sometimes you could have just like you could find these weird combos that like, oh wait, but if you did this, then this could work, and then it's like there's always something new to find.
Mm-hmm.
And as somebody who's played like a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh, or I've been playing some Pokemon, a lot of it feels super linear, like solved, kind of like you already know, like this thing searches this thing, and you're supposed to do this thing. Like it feels like it's already figured out. But MetaZoo, it was always like you'd always find like a little nugget, like, oh, I found this thing.
Yeah, and it's like hidden. It's not necessarily like really in your face, and then I don't know. It just everything kind of moved around a lot. I like how the meta kind of moved, even though like Quetz was always really good, or Fish and Critters are good. Like things moved around, except for in the Nightfall block when Frog got really good. But
the water.
other than that,
that was a funny one. That's funny. No, I appreciate that. That's so part of the design aspect, right? I mean, first of all, thank you for the compliments, guys. It was really hard doing all of that unique stuff with the time we had to work with. Part of the thing that I understand was, and this is all transparent that Mike basically said, and we all kind of communicated, like we didn't want to have set rotation, we didn't want to have ban lists, we also ideally didn't want those old school cards to go out of flavor. How do we create a world where Quetz and Gummeroo still exist, but also have rooms for other cards? It's really hard. It's really hard to do that. And people, we don't give game designers and R&D teams enough credit for how hard it is to make a card game. It's one of the most complicated games you can make by far of any game medium. This exponential amount of like mechanics to work with you have going on.
You don't get patch
and
updates.
Yeah, right. How do you do a patch update, right? I mean, you could argue that a new set is like a patch update. But I mean, is it really? Like, you can't take back what you already made in the past. You can have rata here and there if needed, but the player base can only handle so much of that. So part of the flowing, like, that was my philosophy, right? Like, if you knew me as a designer, like inside, I basically anything I made, I would counter it like 6 times the next set. Like I was a goal. I am not partial to any designs. If I make something, like if I have a child, I'm gonna kill that child 6 times in the grave, shut it down. Because I'm not married to anything. There's nothing I really like. I'm not like if you ask me my favorite card to design, I don't know. Because I'm not married to any of them. Like I really am not. And that's how, in my opinion, that's a sign of a good designer. Because the moment you're married to an idea, you hold yourself back. You're restricting designs, right? Like you have to just be impartial. Like, hey, I made this thing. That's cool. But what about this thing? And you counter it, right? I always made sure that, the metagame didn't have to be like all 10 archetypes are viable, but at the minimum, archetypes had to change, card pools had to change, thinking had to change, right? And I'm glad for most of the MetaZoo, metagame history, there was still like those same decks, still there's some critters, you could still whip it out, still hit, top cut, Ashes Cup, you can still play it, right? You can still whip out Water Deck, right? After all the frog hate, still around, still kicking, right? That to me was I was really proud of that as a metagame accomplishment, for as long as I was here,
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of your lessons, and again, I always say this, like I don't want this to be like the MetaZoo hour or whatever, but it translates to all prospective game designers when you're thinking about these philosophies on, the impact designing a card might have and how you really shouldn't be too precious about these things. Another way to look at it too is your favorite card might be the card that you've never made, so you just have to keep making cards. The ones that already exist have already happened. You did that in the last set, you're on the latest one. I really like that advice though, just not to be don't be too precious about some of these things.
Yeah, no, 100%. But yeah, like if you will lock yourself in place as a designer, and part of that, kind of the same token, if you can't take criticism on your cards, right, and if you can't criticize your own cards, that's something huge as well, right? It's kind of the same thing. If you're married to an idea, you aren't able to look at your ideas objectively, or as best as you can,
You were in a leadership role, and I think a lot of people coming into game design and when it comes to making their own TCG or board game or just game in general, they might not have had the opportunity to have to lead a team and things like that. And honestly, leadership it's a skill. Like it's tough. Can you tell me, like, based on your experience, like maybe what you have learned, how you collaborate with teams and treat others, or is there any takeaways that you've had while sort of in that position?
Be kind. You can't go wrong with that.
Yeah.
We all deserve more kindness, in general.
Sure.
Obviously be honest also, right? You can be kind and be honest, right?
Yeah.
It's usually how you phrase things that's important. It's not the substance of what you say as much, more of how you phrase it, and being a mirror. Instead of saying something like you have to do this, you have to look at this. I mean, phrasing things like that's a good idea, but have you thought about XYZ? Like those simple phrasings. I stole that from somewhere, by the way, but those simple phrasings go a long way. Out of transparency, most people know the MetaZoo team was small, right? As a whole, it was a small company. And in terms of leadership, I was only a leader to a handful of people, right, in general. But that doesn't mean I had no leadership skills. It doesn't mean I couldn't lead myself and lead my team with the other people who was with the company, right, at the same time. So you have to also learn to be assertive with your ideas. If you're that adamant about it, like you have to have some ego if you're going to be a leader. Doesn't mean you're arrogant, right? But you have to know that, hey, like I have good ideas. You have to believe that,
Yeah,
because if you
some
don't believe
confidence.
that, yeah, there's no baseline.
Do
There's no
you,
baseline at all.
do you feel like that is a tough thing for, I guess, like TCG enthusiasts, or even like, I'll just say like even myself kind of as a nerd sometimes of being a little bit more confident, kind of, putting your foot down. Do you feel like that's something that we as a collective kind of struggle with, or is it something that we lean into often?
Yeah, as nerds, we suck at it. We are really bad at it in general. It may not seem like it, but I changed a lot over time. I was always like, I'm half Asian, half white. I was basically that stereotypical Asian shy nerd growing up. I never really broke out of my shell for most of my life. Bad with girls. I have a girlfriend of 6 years now. Love her to death, but I kind of grew out of
Congrats.
that.
Congrats.
Yeah.
Thank you. But I was nothing for most of my life, to be honest with you. I'm not trying to be that harsh on myself, but I was really shy, and just did the schoolwork, did the grades. I was awkward, all of that kind of stuff. What kind of off topic, but on topic, what put me out of that shell was actually just I was tired of it. I had to push myself to gain confidence and ego. And I have to attribute that to theater.
Mhm.
I was, 4 musicals in high school, 3 plays, right? Did show choir. You'd be surprised what any kind of like public speaking performance kind of role would do to your confidence levels. I think anything where you're talking with people face to face, right? And you're out there, you're putting stuff on the spot, that will make you a lot less awkward, a lot better at talking with people. And it worked for me, So
Mm.
I have to say, like, even though I never was like a formal leader before MetaZoo, the fact that I had all that theater experience, I went into college way differently. Like people saw me as like, hey, this guy, not afraid. He's an icebreaker, right? He's not afraid to say what's on his mind, right? Not afraid to speak up. Raises his hand in class. Will argue with the professor. He's that kind of guy, right?
Mhm.
The professor knows him on a first name basis, right? Well, that's the kind of guy he is. But that didn't happen overnight. Like you have to, if you are shy and you don't have any confidence, it's kind of a breaking point, in my opinion, where you have to decide, hey, I'm going to keep being shy. Am I going to have no confidence in myself, or are you going to try to get out there and take some risks?
Mm.
So
Regarding risks, so I know you're starting development of your own board game. What are some of the risks you balance, even kind of going into that, right? So anytime you start something new, you kind of have to take a pause and be like, all right, how much time is this going to take? What are the resources? Yeah, we know you can develop a game, but I always think there's like the logistics of distribution, manufacturing, play test. Like there's so much that goes into it. Where where are you at in this process with your project?
sure, yeah. So right now we're still in the development phase. Big risk is I had, honestly, the idea of Crazy Croppers, it happened like midnight. Like I was like midnight, tired. And to be honest with you, this would happen like a few months ago, actually. I actually decided to give up on game design after I left MetaZoo.
Mm.
Like I kind of just gave up on it. I decided wasn't for me anymore, wasn't my space, all that. Did the nursing stuff, became a CNA, became certified, passed the test, all that in school, right? But then one day at midnight, got the idea, Crazy Croppers, wrote out a rule book, 8-page, 10-page rule book in like 4 hours. It was at 4 a.m. I passed out, woke up. Hey, this is actually a good idea. I was like, and I just ran with it. I found Logan, Damien. I being part of the MetaZoo, I learned that this is a big thing. You can't you talked about this for in a previous podcast, but you can't do everything on your own. You can't do art on your own, distribution on your own. You can't make a game on your own. Like, it's a team-based thing. I knew I needed a team. It didn't have to be 50 people. It didn't have to be even a dozen. But I needed like some people I could rely on. So I reached out to Stabcraft Games.
I call them like accountability partners. Even if I say that to some people, I'm like, even if you're not helping, like even working on it, check back in with me. All right, please, like say, hey, where are you at on this thing? Just because it really helps sometimes. Like if you're doing anything that's your passion, it's so easy to get distracted by just life, right? You have a lot of folks, wisely so, you have your main job and you're trying to do your aspirational passion on the side, and sometimes life just grinds you down and you just need somebody to pop back and be like, hey, where we're at on this thing. So
Right. But I guess to answer the question more, like the challenges, right? Because I'm doing so much stuff, trying to still have dates with my girlfriend, still working full time, right? Like school, all of that. You got to compromise. Okay, you have to settle on certain things, and you have to make life easier on yourself. So in regards to game design, right? One thing is compromising your mechanics, right? Being like, okay, I'm hands off. I'm not going to change this anymore. I'm not going to change this mechanic anymore. A lot of times, if you're into game design, if you're a creative person, you don't set a limit on yourself. You think, oh, limits, like no limits exist, and that's good for generating ideas, but it's not good for chipping away and getting the good ideas. If you want to perfect something, you gotta have the image of it in place. The canvas has to be there. You can't have unlimited canvas. You have to have a canvas that's set, right? I mean, Michelangelo, he knew he was working with, right? He knew there was like a ceiling above, right? He had a limit in place. It was a big ceiling. he knew it was a pretty big one, and he had a big brain, right? But he knew there was a limit in place. You gotta set that. So setting limits, like how many cards am I designing? What's the maximum hand size I want for my cards? What's the maximum numbers I want to work with for my stats?
Okay.
Setting limits, all of that. That really is the trick to game balance I've learned. Okay, because a lot of times, like this is a big balance tip for all card game designers. If you do not know the highest numbers for your attack points, your defense points, your deck size limits, your hand limits, how many archetypes you're going to have, all those limits in place, you do not know your game.
What's your blue eyes white dragon?
Yeah, exactly. And understanding by limits, I mean, you don't go past that. You do not go past that ever. Because if you go past that, you got to do all the work again. All the work of balancing, like cost curving, play testing, all of that. In a lot of games, they break their limits too much. You have to know your limits to your game. If you do not have that when you make the game, and you can't tell that to someone on your team, you don't know your game. So, like in the board game, like Crazy Croppers I'm working on, right? I already went in. I got a cost curve built. I know the limits of the game outright. I have the formulas made for the balance, and this game is pretty damn well balanced if you actually look into it. I think Logan Damien are pretty proud with how it's come along, and for me, game balance is not the important thing with the development phase right now. We're working on things like making rules easier to understand, making condensing mechanics to make it easier to learn, and also I don't know if I'm going to talk about this too much in this podcast, but accessibility. How do you make a game that's good for colorblind people, good for physical impairments overall, that kind of stuff. So that's kind of a discussion.
I never really thought about that. That's really cool.
Yeah, you know what? The accessibility in the tabletop industry, it's very behind. It's probably been talked about past 4 or 5 years. There is a website called Meeple Like Us. The author breaks down I think he's broken down 200 board games and how accessible they are via different metrics. But he's actually a PhD doctorate, and he actually made a book that was published last month called Tabletop Game Accessibility. It's a textbook, and I've read through most of it at this point. But it's a pro tip: if you want your game to stand out in this market, especially for an indie game, you got to think about accessibility. You know, the latest stat I heard about was around 16% of the world has some kind of disability, right?
Oh wow.
You know, if you think about it also this way, right? Around 300 million people are colorblind, right?
Hmm.
Around the world. That's a lot of people. If your game is not colorblind accessible, you just cut away potentially 300 million customers, right? From your game.
That's wild to think about.
Yeah,
Yeah. We don't talk about accessibility at all. I mean,
that's
look,
a gem right
font,
there.
thank you. Font size, right, of the cards, font style, contrast on cards, right? Yu-Gi-Oh! How bad, like
Oh
how poor of a game is that for accessibility?
yeah,
You know,
on so many different levels.
The worst. Financial,
it is. Yeah,
physical.
and we don't font size that's the obvious one, but what about things like how much shuffling you have to do in a game, right?
Mhm.
Imagine if someone has a physical impairment, maybe they can't shuffle, they don't have any limbs, right? Like how do you make your game playable for these people, or do you have to do it? If there's one takeaway I want to say from this book, before I move on or we move on, it's that accessibility sounds really good. It's like, oh, let's do it. Let's all do it, guys. But there's also a con with accessibility because, and I didn't say this, the author of the textbook said it in the very first chapter in the beginning. Inaccessibility is what makes the fun of games. It sounds ridiculous to say, but think about it, right? Would soccer be soccer if it wasn't challenging to play? Would Yu-Gi-Oh be Yu-Gi-Oh if you couldn't search through your deck and you couldn't
Mhm.
special summon from extra deck? It's challenges that creates the uniqueness in a game. And without uniqueness, there is no game. So what the author proposes in the book, I keep saying the author because I forgot his name. I'm terrible with names, except for you guys. But what the author proposes in the book is instead of making tabletop games completely accessible for all groups of people, you got to pick and choose your battles. Like you're going to have dump stats, right? You're going to have something in your game that makes it not very accessible for one group. And that's okay, right? That's okay. If the compromise is you increase accessibility in other ways. So maybe your game isn't that. This is a very common problem in card games. Your game is too complex. It's cognitively too inaccessible. People with dementia can't play it. People with maybe a learning disability can't play it. People who are older will have a hard time playing it because as you get older, you don't have as much fluid intelligence, you know? But maybe your game is colorblind friendly. Maybe your game is good for visually impaired. Maybe your game is good for those with I don't know, socioeconomic disabilities, right? There's a compromise you have to have in general for your game. So if you're a indie game designer, a tabletop game designer, really start thinking about accessibility metrics, and you may have a wider audience, better PR, make more money because more people are maybe buying your game at the same time. So some advice there.
Now, those are some really good points and like jewels that you don't really think about the accessibility, especially in today's day. Well, in the day and age of now, you have to have you have to be accessible. You have to be inclusive of lots of different groups, but most importantly, those who have like physical limitations, because, you know, now especially if you're wanting to get back to the essence of TCGs where it's, you know, meeting in person, that kind of social interaction. So yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah. So what kind of made you lean more towards the tabletop, maybe board game aspect? Because I think that's really interesting. There's a lot of overlap between the TCG and tabletop industry, I would say. What sort of drove you into that direction?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I'll be very honest. At this point, as a designer, I'm not super in favorable of the trading card game model.
Mm-hmm.
Just for the consumer, I'm a very pro-consumer mindset as a designer. You know, Doesn't mean I hate trading card games. I still love trading card games. I just think the model a lot of trading card games use is not very pro-consumer via booster packs or other ways. The way I describe myself is I may not love the trading card game model, but I love card games. I love card games. I love roguelites. I love deck building games. I also love ECGs, expandable card games. Any kind of game where you buy a lot of the cards already. Games like Keyforge, I love Keyforge. That's not exactly a trading card game, but you can buy multiple decks. It also doesn't mean I don't think there can be pro-consumer trading card games. I think a model of that is possible. It also doesn't mean I'll be upfront too, right? I think having a secondary market is cool, right, for a game. I think it's cool for cards to have value at the same time. But at the same time, as a designer, I'm trying to think, for me, after MetaZoo, I want to design games that everyone can enjoy, or almost everyone can enjoy. Most people, everyone can basically access. And I don't want to restrict things from players. I want players to be able to play the game, not have a problem playing it. So for me, working on a board game or working on an ECG, that's more what I'm leading to as a designer these days. With a board game, there's a lot less pressure to do things like power creep and set rotation, right? Because the game itself needs to be good. It needs to be good outright. And because it's a board game, the game is actually cooperative, so I don't have to make cards that are just outright better than someone else or have pressure. I can make the game basically all balanced and focus on diversity of a good game,
Right.
So that's why I lean towards the board game model overall.
Okay. Who would you say your target audience is for your game? Who do you picture playing it?
So I picture a few different groups. First group is just general board gamers. Board gamers are nerds, and they want to play like a cooperative social game. A lot of them. So this game is made from 1 to 4 players, and it's cooperative, so it's good for them. Anyone into botany, I think if you like plants, people may like. I told my girlfriend, "Hey, it's a game about plants," and she hates plants. Like, who likes plants, right? And I mean, right? Who likes plants? And that's also why it chose the theme, because if I'm being honest, you guys know I'm an icebreaker. I am tired of all card games and board games being around people, animals, robots, things that move, right? I want, like, as someone who has a biology major, plants are cool, right? We don't think about it. A banana is cool, right? Carrot is cool. Think about it.
Yeah.
A tree is really cool. That thing is standing up, resisting wind resistance you probably couldn't handle. Okay, that thing is going to be alive longer than some people. Okay, that thing is cool. And I want people to see plants differently playing the game. I want them to be like, dang, I got out my eggplant. Eggplant's cool, right? I want a kid to say that. I want a kid to be like, hey, carrots are cool. And my strawberry is cool. My mango's cool. So I want people to say that.
So does that mean that they're going to be like hybrid plants, like or is it going to be like how I don't know how this game is so far, so I'm getting interested in it but I've been we have like our hybrid plants like carrots and there's a wild variant. So are we going to have like wild variant and like GMO variant? What we got?
The GMO expansion.
The GMO, that's a good idea. So okay, the premise of the game is it's in the future, and we're still working on the lore, and this may change, right? And actually, Logan and Damien are, really pushing the lore. They're doing a great job with it. But you're basically a farmer in space, and you're farming on a moon, and you're working for a company which may have some lore involved.
This is awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, and you're just farming some carrots and veggies or whatever the heck to make some money to meet a quota. That's it. And you can farm with up to 3 other buddies, on this little moon. You're just farming these plants. So where does the cards come in? The cards are the plants. You have a deck of 40 cards, and you don't actually they don't actually deck build entirely, because something I've learned is I learned this especially from my girlfriend. Thank you, girlfriend. But people like card games. Not everyone likes deck building. That's a big thing. Okay, so in the game, you don't actually deck build. What you do is you have 10 different groups of cards, like caffeine cards like cocoa, like tea, like coffee, right? And then maybe you have mushrooms, not a plant. It's still fauna, okay? It doesn't move anything.
That's your plants are. I mean,
Maybe.
mushrooms are like cosmic. Okay.
Maybe. Man, I don't want to spoil too much. Okay, mushrooms actually like dark. It's like discard pile kind of stuff.
Oh,
Okay.
Okay.
Because
What's
mushrooms
Hand
control.
Decompose.
You know,
Man, come on, Kevin. We need this information. You got me sold.
I'll talk about it. I'll talk about it anymore. Okay, you basically take these two different categories of plants and you mash it up. It's like a mashup. That's not unique to this game. Mashup has been in other games like Smash Up, that kind of stuff. But you mash it up. So I can be like, man, today I'm feeling like playing carnivorous and poisonous. That's going to be my duo. There's 45 unique combinations of decks. And I meticulously have balanced every single archetype to work with every single archetype, all 45 together. You can take any archetype combination of the 45 that have unique play styles and synergies, and you can take it and play it on the hardest difficulty of the game, because it has difficulty scaling as well, and win. That is a promise I'm trying to hold. I've been stress testing the heck out of the game to make sure it all works, and currently it works as intended. So, but yeah, I mean, the goal of the game is that even if you, like, I originally wanted a board game card game hybrid, okay, and this is kind of close enough to it. I wanted a board gamer who's on like Yu-Gi-Oh or whatever to play this game, and it would be like, wow, you know, that mechanic of the discard thing, the replay thing, that was pretty cool. And they play like, I don't know, Yu-Gi-Oh, and they see like Monster Reborn and be like, wow, you know, this discard mechanic reminds me of Crazy Croppers. Maybe I can play Yu-Gi-Oh now, right? Because I think card games, not only is it an oversaturated medium, but it's too complicated as a whole. But that it doesn't mean the mechanics of card games can't be introduced differently to a different audience. And it doesn't mean we can't get people into card games from a board game point of view coming in, you know? So, but yeah, I mean, all the archetypes in the game, they're based around different themes, you know, swarm mechanics, right? You got some like, you know, action manipulation going on, discard pile manipulation. And it's hard to talk about like the differences between the archetypes because it is a little bit game specific. And I will say the game is, you know me, the game is very different than a lot of other games. It's really different, okay? But it's simple. I mean, it's a card game. You play cards, you draw 6 cards in the beginning, you play cards. There's actually no resource system either. There's no land or anything. There's no energy you spend on. You just play a card, you know, basically, on a land, and that's it. So I'm trying to keep the game as simple as possible, but it doesn't mean it's not complex. I've designed the 10 archetypes to be varying difficulty. So 4 of them are pretty easy to understand. And then you got some other ones with like one keyword that's like 5 sentences long, like 100 words to understand, like complexity, you know?
Okay, so does that have a higher win percentage? Like, do you feel like the simpler the deck is, the tough, I guess, the easier it is to pick up, but the lower the win percentage, and then the more skill intensive, you should have higher win percentages depending on?
That is a great question. You would think yes, but the answer is no. And that was a really hard thing. It's really hard to do that game design wise. I've tried to design complexity where it doesn't matter. You can take the easy clades, or they call it clades in the game, archetypes, but you can take the easy clades and still do well and perform well. If anything, some of the archetypes are better or worse in different multiplayer accounts. You know, some are better solo. You can play the game by yourself, or some are better with multiplayer, right? It depends. And that's okay for me. But I've tried to do a really good job at making sure the complexity isn't the thing that determines the power. I know a lot of games, make higher complexity things too good sometimes to compensate for how hard it is to do, to use the thing, which makes sense, But to me, I think it's even harder and more interesting if complexity isn't a factor. Complexity is like, because I'm a nerd, I like playing the high complex stuff, right? It's a lot more thinking involved, and it can be better. It can be better sometimes than the easy stuff, but in general, it's not, because they're all based around the same balance, the same curve, and that's really hard to do. But a lot of time, a lot of testing, it works so far.
Now, Kevin, if you tell me I'm going to give my all to this game, and if you tell me that Fearsome Critters has the same win rate as, I don't know, Gassy Combo or OTK, I'm going to be upset, but I'm still playing because I support you.
That's fair. Well, okay. If we're keeping this card game based, the way we got to treat balance in a PvE game like this is very different than we got to treat balance in a PvP game with a meta, right? Because it's PvE, I can actually make a purely balanced game. That's just a lot of diversity, right? The game honestly feels like a puzzle sometimes because of how it works, but it is a card game, and there's a lot of strategy involved with tactical stuff and all you have to do. If you want some more gem advice, I'll say this. If I was to design a PvP game, right, obviously it can't all be balanced, right? That's the thing. There has to be a changing meta. But a lot of designers are like, okay, how unbalanced should it be? Like, if I take Fearsome Critters versus Gassy, what should the win rates be? This is some gem advice that I try to follow in a PvP game, and I would follow if I had to do another one. 30%. That's the magic number. So 30 in an ideal world, your deck, for a really competitive metagame, a deck should ideally beat 30% of decks like positive win rate, like 60%. It should also lose 30% for sure against, it should lose against 30% of its matchups. The other 40% is like about balanced. If you follow that rule, like if you know that a deck would lose, against 30% of the matchups, that's pretty significant enough. It's like a minimum I would try to follow for your metagame balancing. People, those numbers can change a little bit here and there, but still, I would try to have like 30% of your matchups are like almost guaranteed wins or like significant advantages and significant disadvantages to maintain that healthy metagame. Those are ideals, right? Now, in reality, metagames will shift for a variety of reasons. Like, people want to play the waifu deck. Happens, right? They want to play it. They want to play Fearsome Critter. It's just cheap. Cards are too pricey, right? It'll change for a lot of reasons, right? But if you have to ignore all the metagame factors and you talk about, like, as a designer, try to keep your matchups where, hey, it will have a significant advantage against like a third-ish of the decks and a significant disadvantage against a third of the decks, and then be neutral against those matchups, right? So
I think you've got to hit though. This is a really clever idea. Easton, real quick, if you were marketing this, what do you think would be a good strategy? What can we throw towards Kevin's way? I'd like to see this in Callaways, like nurseries and stuff like that.
Oh yeah. If I was marketing this, I definitely would be leaning into, I mean, what age range are we looking at? What kind of are we looking friendly?
I think this might sound weird, but I think this would be great to bridge age gaps if you have a like grandma and grandchild. And I don't mean like everybody in between, of course, but like it's gonna help bridge. I would hope, or I would think it would be a bridge between the two.
Then if there's plant, then they could get out and do activities to see said plant or make said. Oh, that's cool. You could sell seeds with it.
I would think of maybe it would be great to get it into museums for like natural history museums when they check out and they're looking for those kind of products. Obviously, there's a whole digital campaign you can do, and there's a lot of really cool, unique things with that. But museums, Callaway's, like the nurseries. That would be perfect.
I'd also leverage against a lot of, or leverage the like FFA, like the Future Farmers of America,
Oh,
agriculture base. I think that would be huge because it's funny enough, a lot of farmers are huge nerds. You know, they just are like doing their other things. But I think that it would be really cool because, you know, I think that there's going to be a huge shift towards more agriculture and agribusiness, everything like that, here in the coming years. And this could definitely help with, you know, promoting that. I think that you also could put like, I think it would be cool if you put like seeds, like if you like whether you could sell a pack, or like a pack, or maybe the box looks like I don't know, like some type of like braid or something like
the
that.
box can be a compostable planter. I don't know. Yeah, just throwing that out there. But regardless, the game sounds a lot of fun. I think it's gonna, in my mind, it's gonna be bridging a lot of like generational gaps. You know, obviously, you're not gonna play Yu-Gi-Oh with your grandparents. Okay, you're not gonna play it with your younger brother. Maybe it depends the age gap, but I think something like this, yeah, you're gonna make those connections. So
yeah.
I think we're wrapping up on our hour here. Kevin, is there any way, how can people find you? How can people find Croppers? Give us the deets.
Yeah. So also thanks for the advice. Marketing there. Appreciate that. So SCG, Snapcraft Games, go into Discord. We have a playtesting applications there. You can look into it. I think we're gonna, last time I checked, we're doing monthly rotations. So, or not rotations, but monthly add-ins. So if you want to playtest via applications there every month, just hop on there. For me personally, I'm on Discord like every day. So you can, I'm not really like vocal on a lot of social media, but Discord in particular, hit me up there. And yeah, I mean, in general, like if you have any inquiries, you want advice, like rulebook look at, you know, anything, like I love helping people out for free. Like there is this Discord server for homemade card games I've been on recently, and I love just giving, you know, free advice to game designers, and you know, people who want to make games. You know, I'm not saying I'm the best expert, right? But I'm free, you know, and I can, you know, help out here and there, because you know, the game design community has done a lot for me, and the community in general has done a lot for me. So I want to get back whenever I can, you know. But yeah, hit me up a DM if you want to contact me. You know, I'm open. So
Excellent. All right, well, fellas, it's been great seeing y'all. Kevin, thanks for joining us. Appreciate you stacking the deck. If anybody wants to get a hold of Kevin, again, hop into Stab Crab Games. I believe he's in Giddm Games as well, our Discord. So find him, track him down, and tap into his wealth of knowledge.
Definitely.
All right. Appreciate y'all.
See ya.
See you guys. Bye-bye.